and we are going to be able to hear from Mr. Greg Cartwright. He is our Chief Financial Officer, and many of you or some of you may have heard that Greg has announced his retirement, and so his final day in Allen ISD will be September 4th. And as many of you know who've worked with him or interacted with him, he is a trusted member of our Allen ISD cabinet and worked with the board of trustees for the last 6 years. And his experience will certainly be missed. But we have another person on the call as well. We recently named Greg's replacement. And his replacement is Johnny Hill. So Mr. Johnny Hill is on tonight. And he has spent the last 12 years in Lake Travis ISD as the Assistant Superintendent for Business, Financial, and Auxiliary Services. And so Johnny and Greg have already began working together to provide a seamless transition as Greg goes into retirement and Johnny comes on board. And so we are very lucky to be in good hands with both these gentlemen. So I'll turn it over to Greg at this time, and he can present on our Allen's financial status. Thank you, Greg.
All right. Thank you, Superintendent Bullock. I'm hoping everybody can see the bond debt overview cover screen here. Tonight, I would just say welcome to everybody who's joined. I'm glad that you all are showing the interest in our community, and we like to take the chance to provide some information here about our current status and also for the upcoming bond election. So when we look at a bond debt overview, the Texas law allows that an independent school district may levy and assess ad valorem taxes in two sections. One would be for the maintenance of public schools within the district. So that's for the maintenance and operations, or also referred to as M&O for the district. And then the second category would be for the payment of principal and interest on bond debt. That is also referred to as the interest and sinking portion of the total tax rate, and that's also sometimes known as the debt service portion. So there are two parts of the tax rate for a school district. So when you look at your tax bill, you'll see a total tax rate and the total taxes, but there's actually two sections that make up that. Now, when we say ad valorem taxes, what does that mean? Well, ad valorem is meaning according to value, and that value is the assessed value of property that resides within the taxing jurisdiction. So in this case, obviously that's all of the properties that reside within the Allen ISD boundaries. The Collins Central Appraisal District is the entity that will assess those values and come up with the amount of those property values. The school district does not have any authority or control of those amounts. However, once we do have those property values from the appraisal district, the Allen ISD School Board of Trustees have the authority to assess the M&O and INS tax rates, and they do that on an annual basis. So for the use of funds for the bond debt, when you look at the law, it's fairly generic in its statements of what you can use for the bond funds. It's to construct, to renovate, or to equip school facilities. When it says to construct, obviously that can be the building of new facilities, renovations can be included, and also to equip school facilities. And that is very broad in that when you say equip school facilities, that could be referring to technology projects, security, large HVAC projects, roofing repair or new roofing. It could be large projects such as concrete work, lighting programs, etc. Now, within our maintenance and operations budget, we do have funds within for regular maintenance. However, we want to note that within that operational budget, 82% of it is there for payroll and for the payment of our staff. There's also a lot of fixed costs such as utilities and insurance, et cetera, that are included. So it leaves a more limited amount of what I'd call discretionary funds within the operations budget, and not as much funds available for these large projects. And that's why we look a lot of times to the bond debt to help fund these large capital projects. It also allows the purchase of necessary sites, in other words, land for school facilities, purchase of new school buses, and also the retrofitting of school buses for safety and security equipment. So some of the questions here we could have is, what are bonds and how long does it take to pay them off? School bonds are an investment instrument that raises immediate funds for capital projects, but requires payment back to the investors in the form of principal and interest. The state law sets a maximum of 40 years that can be used for bond maturities, but that is not a really fiscally conservative way to do things, because 40 years, that would be a large interest payments required for that. So Allen ISD uses maturities from 1 year up to 25 years for our bond debt. So how do bonds work? Well, the sale of the bonds can only occur with a voter-approved authorization, and that's the bond election. And then the district can sell these municipal bonds to raise the funds to pay for the capital projects. Those bond sales usually will occur spread out over 1 to 5 years of the bond program. Bids are taken from interested buyers out in the market and then are sold at the lowest interest rate offered. The rate will be based on both the state's bond guarantee and also on the district's underlying bond rating. Many years ago, the state set up a program to where they will back the bond debt for the school districts within the state. And in doing so, that will provide the ability for districts to go out in the market with a AAA rating, which is the highest rating, which will help sell the bonds with the lowest interest rates possible. However, the investors are still interested in what the underlying bond rating would be. And for Allen ISD, we have a AA2 from Moody's rating, and we have a AA from S&P rating. And those are both strong credit ratings and shows the strength of the financial position for the district. And we have to note that principal and interest are then repaid over an extended period of time using the taxes that are collected from the debt service tax rate. And so the investors out there are interested in purchasing the municipal bonds that are issued by a school district because they're tax exempt and also have that AAA backing by the state of Texas. So what is a bond election really? It provides individuals within the community an opportunity to vote yes or no for the use of bond debt to pay for large capital projects. It is a request by the district and school board to provide that elected school board of trustees the authority to sell a certain amount of bonds to fund the facility needs. Bonds may not be issued and taxes may not be levied unless authorized by this majority of qualified voters of the district voting at an election held for that purpose at the expense of the district per the election code. So what difference between a bond authorization and a bond sale? Well, the bond authorization just specifies the maximum amount of bonds that the district and the school board is authorized by the voters to be able to sell out in the market. And as I noted earlier, the bond sales may occur over a period of time with the date and the actual amount of each sale would be approved by the Board of Trustees. Other key questions about bonds: if the bond election passes, does the school district immediately incur debt? And that would be no. The election only provides the authorization. The debt is not incurred until the bonds are actually sold out in the market. If the bonds are authorized, is the district obligated to spend the money? Well, no, they're not obligated. It's just an authorization from the voters. And again, they'll be sold in the future only when those funds are needed to fund the projects within the bond program, and they will be reviewed and would need to receive board approval for those bond sales. Is technology equipment, which has shorter asset life, be funded by 25-year bonds, since that Allen ISD will go up to 25-year maturities on their bonds? No. For capital improvement items with such shorter lifespans, for example, the technology devices, the bond maturities will be closely matched with the life of the assets. And also to note that for bond sales, there's a recent state law that now requires that the average of the bond maturities when they're being sold are not to exceed 120% of the average of the asset lives. Just want to note that in previous bond elections and bond sales, Allen ISD was already following this and keeping bond maturities reasonably matched to the asset life. Also, key item, how will this bond election affect homeowners who are over 65? So school district taxes on resident homesteads are frozen in the year that the owner taxpayer turns 65 years of age. So in other words, their taxes will not increase as a result of a school bond election, subsequent bond sales, or any increases on the school tax rates. Their tax amount has been frozen. The only way it could change is if the actual rates and taxes go down, that there would be an actual decrease to what they have as a frozen amount, then they would get the decrease. Or if the homeowner does substantial improvements to the house that increases its value, then that could unfreeze the values to go up. But in most cases, those taxes will remain frozen. So as we said, there's two categories of the total tax rate: the maintenance and operations tax rate, and that is used for all our payroll, utilities, supplies, et cetera. 82% of it's for payroll, and these funds are subject to recapture or Robin Hood that people probably heard about. And then the other category is the interest and sinking tax rate, also known as the debt service tax rate. That can be used for the payment of principal and interest on bond debt. The board does have the authority to approve up to a 50 cents per $100 property value. Allen ISD does not qualify for state funding. There's some state funding that's provided for districts who have lower property values per number of students, but our property value per student is higher than that maximum level, so we do not receive help from the state on paying our debt service. However, note there is no recapture or Robin Hood on the debt service side. Another key item to note, though, that the INS tax rate and collections, or the debt service collections, are not allowed to be used to pay for maintenance and operation expenses such as teacher salaries, adding staff, paying utilities, any of those operational. That is not allowed by law. So a look at the historical tax rates for Allen ISD. You can see for the past 7 years, the M&O tax rate there in the second column, we were at $1.17 per $100 property value. It has decreased down to $1.14 for several years. And then in last year, the 1920 year, that rate went down to 1.0489. And then we're proposing for this next year that would continue to decrease down to 1.0225. So that's that property tax compression or decrease that the state was talking about when they were changing laws last year of trying to provide relief to local property taxpayers. Then in the next column, the INS tax rate, we were at the maximum 50 cents several years ago. It was brought down about 2 pennies each year, and then was at 41 cents last year. That was to help pay both our annual debt service and to redeem or retire some debt. And we'll talk about that here in a moment. But you can see our total tax rate from about 8 years ago, $1.67. We're proposing for next year would be 1.4325, which is almost 24 cent or 24 penny decrease in that total tax rate. So what would that possibly mean with having that M&INS tax rate decreasing for the 2021 year? If we looked real quickly at just the 1920 numbers that we received from the appraisal district, the average market value of a house or homestead was about $373,000. Average exemption is taken away from that, so the average taxable value was about $345,000. You divide it by the $100, you get $34.54, and then you apply the M&O tax rate to that, and then you apply the INS tax rate, and you would come up that last year, roughly that would be a total tax of $5,039. if we were to look at this coming year with the proposed tax rates and based on the estimated values from the appraisal district, that average taxable value for a homestead is now $349,000, which is roughly for homesteads and existing properties, that's about a 1.1% increase versus last year. Then we apply the proposed M&O tax rate, 1.0225, and then the INS tax rate. And so this can be an estimated tax would be 5,004, or an average estimate of roughly a $35 decrease. So that's just to kind of show that with that decrease or compression of the maintenance and operations tax rate, along with keeping the INS tax rate at the 41 cents, there is the potential that some of the homeowners could see a decrease in their property tax next year. So let's look at where we are right now for Allen ISD for our current debt. And this is as of August 16th, 2020. It'll show that each of the years we have principal and interest that we pay. It's about 50 million for next year, and then that will continue to decrease and goes all the way on out to the year 2042. So you can see our total debt obligations at this point in time is a little over 857 million. I want to note, though, that the school board and the district staff are always looking at opportunities to lower that debt obligation total for the district and for our taxpayers. And due to interest rates being at historical lows over the past several years, we have opportunities to do what we call bond refundings, which are similar to refinancing. Some of you with owning homes and having mortgages might be knowledgeable about doing a refinancing to lower your cost. Well, we have pretty much annually found opportunities to do bond refunding and to reduce the amount of interest that would be owed in future years. And over these past 10 years, we have done enough refunding to where we've reduced the debt obligation on the interest cost side by almost $63 million. And just take note of that 2019 year, we did a little over 11 million on that refunding. So what does that mean on our where we were to where we are now on our total debt obligations? Well, we heard from our community that there was a concern about the amount of our total debt obligation and would like to see that decrease. And so the school board and the district staff have been looking at all potential opportunities to do that. And if you look at the top line here, that as of December 31st, 2018, our total debt obligations, both principal and interest, were a little over $1 billion. We had our annual debt service paid during 2019 year, principal and interest of 52 million. And then we also did, as I noticed on the previous slide, we had that bond refunding that we did in 2019 for the little over $11 million. So in the calendar year 2019, we reduced our debt obligation by 63 million. So at the end of 2019, we're now at 955 million total debt obligation. Then in February of this year, we identified an opportunity to retire or redeem some principal and then also obtain the related interest savings off of that. So we retired 28 million in callable principal, and that also then produced future interest savings for the taxpayers, 17.6 million. So that was a total 45 million reduction in our debt obligation. And then we also had our calendar year 2020 annual debt service that we owed for principal and interest of about 51 million. So as of August 16th, 2020, we are now at $858 million in our total debt obligation. So in the past 2 years, we have dropped that total by $160 million by both our annual debt service, but also looking for those opportunities for bond refunding and for retiring existing principal. So that's an overview of where we are currently, and also a little bit about bonds and bond election and bond authorizations. I apologize for the technical difficulties. I hope everybody was still able to follow the slides while I was going through. So I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm going to turn it back over to David and to Superintendent Bullock. So thank you.